A man discovers glasses in a church that show the true face of the aliens secretly in charge of the human race. George Nada is an unemployed drifter from Colorado who travels all around the country looking for someplace in sunshine. He arrives at Los Angeles this way, with its tall skyscrapers and endless opportunities. The man visits an employment center in search of a legitimate job. Many individuals who are seeking a job have gathered there. George attends an interview and informs an employment center worker about his challenging situation. Many companies abruptly shuttered in his area, leaving many people without jobs. The woman listens to George without much interest and tells him that he lacks the necessary expertise to be hired. After smiling with disappointment, the man exits the job center. As he wanders aimlessly around the city streets, George comes across a preacher and pauses to listen to him talk. The preacher emotionally informs a small group of spectators that demons have taken the minds of the Earth's ruling class and are using them to manipulate regular people. The speaker urged the crowd to awaken and break free from the control of the ruling elites. When Nada notices the police car, she decides to continue walking. Along the way, he notices a strange guy watching a pointless advertising on the TV behind the store's glass as if hypnotized. However, Nada ignores him and continues to walk. George eventually locates a shelter for the homeless and decides to spend the night there. A woman living next door is enthralled by a television program about a narcissistic star who thinks they will never age. George is exhausted, so he reclines on his chair and sighs deeply, lost in thought. The next day, George goes to a construction site to look for a job as a laborer. The supervisor first declines to hire Nada since they only hire employees who are union members. George, nevertheless, makes a good impression, so the supervisor agrees to a pay negotiation and hires him. Like everyone else, the man starts to work while sweating. Even though his job situation has been settled, he won't be able to get the money for a few days, which means he once again has nowhere to stay the night. Frank, one of the staff, sees the disgruntled newcomer and offers to show him where he may get food and a hot shower. Nada is first skeptical of his new friend but gradually chooses to join him. Along the way, the men find something to speak about and connect over. Frank takes the drifter to a camp and introduces him to friendly residents from all over the world who have come to Los Angeles in search of fortune. Helping one another is the norm in this camp, and kids are at ease there. Gilbert, one of the local guys, assigns George the duty of making the camp cozier right away. When it's time for lunch, George receives a sizable serving of filling cuisine. Frank shares his life story with George over the lunch. Like George, he relocated to another place in search of a job so that he could support his family, who stayed in Detroit. Frank is enraged at the local elite for stuffing their pockets with cash and shuttering almost all of the factories in his hometown, which resulted in the loss of hundreds of jobs. If at least one more factory closes, the guy, who has already run out of patience, will take serious action. Frank feels that the lower classes must battle to live, so he warns George politely that he is prepared to compete with him for a position in the sun. George has greater optimism. He is determined to put in a lot of effort and start over in life. Nada is wandering around the camp in the evening when he sees some locals avidly watching a television commercial promoting artificial nails. The transmission is cut at some time, and a broadcast showing an apprehensive guy comes on the television. He explains how they all live in an artificially created environment. According to him, scientists have discovered that unidentified creatures emit a unique signal to Earth that causes individuals to go into a trance and lose the ability to think critically. There are an increasing number of poor individuals, and racial injustice is on the rise. The aliens manipulated humanity into being unconcerned about everything except their personal benefit. However, the locals ignore the weirdo's warning message on the TV. They simply complain about their headaches and switch channels during the show. George observes a blind priest standing nearby who is exactly repeating the program's speech. Gilbert approaches the priest right away. Although George is unable to hear what the guys are saying, he assumes that they are arguing. Gilbert rushes the elderly guy to the church, which is located on the camp's grounds. George's gaze follows the fleeing guys for a bit longer, and he feels they are hiding something. The next morning, the same broadcast with the strange men comes on TV again, and he urges the transmission of the signal hypnotizing people to be stopped immediately. Once more, the broadcast causes excruciating headaches. Anxious, Gilbert rushes to the church again, this time with George following him. He can hear the woman singing in the church, so he thinks going inside won't raise any suspicions. In the church, he discovers a chemical mini-laboratory and a mystery writing on the wall: "They live, we sleep." The man sees a tape recorder that is recording the woman singing loudly. It just functions as a cover to mask the sounds coming from the private meeting going on behind the wall. Gilbert, The TV guy and other members of the secret organization are attempting to hack the channel once more in order to play their recording longer and attract more viewers in the next room. The group's members aim to recruit as many people as possible in order to spread their thoughts to society more efficiently and effectively. When George hears them discussing, he steps back and unintentionally finds a hidden vault full of boxes. He chooses to leave this mystery for another time, closes the vault, and prepares to go when he comes upon the blind priest. The priest touches George's hands and face before releasing him. He recognizes George as the laborer and begins discussing the revolution without hesitation. All of this disturbs George, and he exits the church. The preacher shouts after the man, telling him that he will ultimately return. A police helicopter comes and begins to circle the church, making the meeting attendees apprehensive. As soon as the helicopter flies away, George borrows a binoculars from a nearby kid and keeps an eye on what is occurring within the building. Gilbert and his minions transport boxes from the building to the vehicle. Frank interrupts George's surveillance. Nada instantly informs his buddy about what he has seen in the church, but Frank cautions him against interfering with the matter as he doesn't want to get into any difficulty. While this is happening, the box-laden vehicle drives away from the church. All day, George uses the binoculars to spy the church, but nothing else occurs. In the evening, the police surround the camp and the church. People are unsure what they are guilty of, so they watch what is happening on silently. Suddenly, the police, backed by bulldozers, proceed to demolish the people's numerous tents and trailers, dispersing them in fear. Horrified, George watches the chaos unfolding as the police ruthlessly destroy the lives of good people. The priest and the preacher from the TV are apprehended by police. They attempt frantically to resist, but the cops beat them until they can no longer breathe. Everyone who doesn't leave the camp will suffer the same fate. George is powerless to help those who have already been apprehended by the police, but he does save a terrified youngster. After narrowly escaping the cops, George and the terrified teenager climb to the top floor of a crumbling church. After wandering through the corridors, they find a room where the remaining survivors are hiding. The individuals spend the entire night at a shelter since they don't know why they were raided. In the morning, they emerge from their hiding place to survey what remains of the camp after the previous night's terror. The camp appears to have been destroyed by a hurricane, but they discover a TV in the midst of the camp that, strangely, is still functional and showing funny advertisements. Meanwhile, George decides to examine the church's secret vault. During yesterday's raid, the provocative writing on the wall next to him was covered up. In the pantry, George discovers one sealed box that matches the ones Gilbert hastily drove away the day before. Immediately, a patrol car passes by the church, forcing George to hide from the authorities. The man opens the box after finding a secure location, and is disappointed to discover dozens of sunglasses inside. He hides the box in a garbage can and only keeps one pair of glasses. As he goes around the city, George decides to put on his glasses, and everything around him becomes black and white. The entire environment, which was once so familiar, adopts a wholly new look. Through the glasses, every billboard, sign, or headline reads, "Obey, marry, breed, consume, buy, don't think, watch TV," and so on. Instead of attractive magazine images, he sees a series of deceptive statements and demands for submission. Even those who formerly appeared normal now reveal their genuine monster faces thanks to the spectacles. He takes them off and puts them back on multiple times to make sure the man in front of him really seems to be an alien. The weird man looks at George suspiciously, but doesn't say or do anything. George dons his spectacles once more and reads the words "This is your God" on the bills. Additionally, he sees that every traffic light in the city has transmitters that emit hypnotic voices. It repeats the order, "Sleep." Nada quickly finds that not everyone is the same. He is amazed when he observes regular people comfortably conversing with others who have the look of alien monsters. And it is instantly evident that monsters are the most successful members of society. As he enters the grocery, George is watching a politician's speech on TV, and an alien is lurking behind his face. Upon learning this, the man bursts out laughing hysterically. He can't help but make fun of the woman pushing him. She, too, appears to be a monster through her sunglasses. He attempts to explain to the common people around him that the creature in front of them is an alien, but by doing so, he simply exposes himself. The lady informs other aliens through the walkie-talkie and her wristwatch about a person who can see their real appearance and describes his look. After receiving the message, the other aliens approach him. George flees onto the street, terrified. Many aliens are staring at him here, but the guy ignores them and taunts the monstrous lady. He is then apprehended by the fake cops. They question George and ask him where he got the glasses, but he refuses to answer. He is then threatened by the guards, who are also trying to convince him to join them. However, George doesn't give in so easily. He attacks the police officers, grabs their guns, and flees. Immediately, police cars start to arrive on the scene. George, armed, chooses to hide at the bank. There, he finds that half of the visitors are also aliens. Driven by adrenaline, the man opens fire on aliens who are disguised as humans. One of the aliens calls another squad of cops and miraculously vanishes before George can kill him. In an attempt to flee the alien pursuers, he runs out of the bank and discovers a drone pursuing him. George destroys it before going to a deserted parking lot, where he meets Holly, a lovely young lady. He checks to see whether she is human, kidnaps the girl, and demands that she bring him to her home. He has to do this to get away from his attackers, who are running for the bank. At Holly's home, an exhausted George collapses on the floor while attempting to justify his actions. He expresses regret to the girl for the trouble he created. He tells her that their planet is in danger, and that evil beings have taken control of everything around them. George urges Holly to put on the sunglasses and see for herself, but she declines and refuses to trust him. When the guy shuts his eyes in tiredness, Holly attempts to walk silently past him, but he monitors her every move. After some time, George calms down and queries his hostage about her occupation. Holly admits that she is a television assistant director. George recalls that the aliens are broadcasting their signal through the television and wants to disrupt it. When the guy lets down his guard, the girl smashes the bottle on his head and tosses him out the window. After falling from the second floor, George miraculously survives, but loses his sunglasses. Meanwhile, Holly reports the incident to the police and calls a squad to her residence. Nada is forced to flee from the police once more and finds a safe spot under the bridge. After dark, the man travels to a different neighborhood and spends the night on the street. The next day, he arrives at the construction site to request Frank's aid in fighting the alien creatures. His friend is frightened of him since George just staged a large shooting in which many people were killed. George tries to convince Frank that they aren't people, but aliens in disguise. However, Frank refuses to listen and urges him to go. When George returns to the location where the box of sunglasses was hidden, all of the garbage cans are empty. The man notices a trash pickup truck parked nearby. He gets into the truck's rear and searches among the trash for some remaining pairs of spectacles. Frank accidentally witnesses George's trashy actions. Frank hands his friend his salary and informs him that he can no longer help him. George insists on his pal wearing on the glasses so he can view the actual world as well. But Frank resists, believing his friend has gone insane. Tired with suspicion, George proceeds to strike his friend, resulting in a heated brawl. Finally, Nada kicks his pal to the floor and makes him wear the glasses. Astounded by the truth, Frank ultimately comes to believe George. The pals get a room at a nearby motel and discuss about what they should do next. Frank assumes that there are other people who see the aliens, and they must look for them. George shares with him a story from his childhood. Living in abject poverty, he was often assaulted by his father. Severe class inequalities created hate in ordinary people, which fueled the aliens for years. George now plans to exact revenge on them for his ruined life. In the morning, the friends meet Gilbert at the motel, who is also wearing sunglasses. He invites them to a secret meeting of like-minded people that evening. The pals arrive at the place and encounter other seers of all ages. They replace the sunglasses with new lenses that are better for the eyes and provide a crisper image. Gilbert thoroughly explains to them the nature of the aliens that swamped the Earth. It appears that the alien invaders are recruiting common people for their own purposes by offering them money and power in exchange for their loyal service. For them, the Earth is nothing more than a business and a transient supply of resources for the development of the Third World. Climate change and all other global calamities are also their doing. When the aliens completely exhaust the Earth, they will move on to enslave new planets. One of the Resistance members shows Frank the alien watch, which he decides to take. The protesters have not been able to crack the secret code on the alien gadget, which enables them to travel freely in space and communicate with one another. Godfrey gathers everyone and declares that they do not yet have enough soldiers to launch a significant attack. However, the group is aggressive and insists that something must be done right away. Gilbert calms the crowd by suggesting that they first locate the source of the signal and hack it in order to break the hypnosis. Holly enters the room and gives a hint as to where the signal could lie. She nervously fiddles with George's sunglasses and apologizes to him for what she done. Their chat is cut short as the cops arrive and open fire on the gathering. The majority of the Resistance members are killed while attempting to flee, but George, Frank, and Holly manage to leave the building unharmed. The guys, who are fully armed, fire back against the aliens before hiding in a street alley. George wants to go to the center of the massacre to find Holly, but Frank prevents him from carrying out his risky plan. He attempts to figure out how the device works so they can listen in on alien communications, but unintentionally opens a portal to another dimension. The police are closing in on the friends' hideout, so they have no choice but to enter the portal. They wind themselves at an alien base below, where they discover writings in an unidentified language. The friends cautiously go down a hallway. They eventually find themselves at a gala dinner where a guy in a fine suit makes a speech praising the alien alliance. He joyfully assures the assembled guests that the aliens would soon entirely take over the Earth, bringing enormous advantages to the human elite. One of the camp's former residents, who also sided with the invaders, approaches the pals. He thinks that Frank and George have also been recruited by the aliens and finds it surprising that they are still wearing poor people's clothing. The guy decides to show the recruits about the base and takes them to an alien airport. Aliens in human form go to other planets in the galaxy from there. They then arrive in the television studio's backstage, where the operations command center is situated. The signal is transmitted globally through satellite, controlling the consciousness of common people. George tricks their tour guide into taking them into the television studio itself. The man agrees, but the security officers won't let them in without a special pass. The men then decide to take action and shoot the aliens. Their old friend attempts to stop them and persuade them to surrender to the new authority. The aliens have taken over the whole world and are in charge of all human behavior. He offers them to join the victors and enjoy the benefits provided by the aliens in exchange for their loyal service. Despite his arguments, the boys had no intention of turning traitors. One of the guards enters the room, and the traitor takes advantage of the opportunity to move through space. The pals take their guns and break into the main office, where hired humans are operating. George questions the staff in an effort to find Holly, but no one has any idea where she is. But he discovers that the signal that causes hypnosis is situated on the roof. The pals rush to the top of the building, where they find Holly, who has managed to live. While shooting at the aliens, the group eventually makes it to the top floor. But Holly is a traitor, and she brutally shoots Frank in the head before ascending the rooftop. George locates an alien signal broadcasting satellite dish and takes aim at it. However, the girl approaches him from behind and orders him to surrender while aiming a gun at him. He refuses, shooting Holly first. The satellite dish is then destroyed by him. Helicopters fire on George right away, but as he is leaving the world, he mockingly shows the aliens his middle finger. George manages to decipher the signal, and mankind is finally exposed to the horrific truth about reality.